In the autumn of 867 AD, a Viking queen is being dragged through the muddy streets of Nottingham. Her name is Elwyn, and just 3 weeks ago she commanded a fleet of 40 longships. Now Saxon soldiers are ripping the clothes from her body, while hundreds of townspeople throw rotting vegetables and human waste at her face. But that's not even the worst part. What the Anglo-Saxons did to capture Viking queens goes far beyond anything you learned in school. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why modern historians have tried to bury this story for over a century. I'm going to reveal 3 things that will completely change how you see medieval England. First, you'll discover how royal women were used as political pawns in ways that defy modern imagination. Methods so brutal they make Game of Thrones look like a children's show. Second, I'll show you how one queen's fate sparked a revenge campaign that lasted over a century and killed thousands. And third, you'll see archaeological evidence that exposes torture methods historians deliberately tried to hide from public view. And if you want more hidden history that textbooks won't teach you, hit that subscribe button right now, because we're going deep into the darkest chapter of the Viking Age: women. You need to know what was happening in England between 865 and 878 AD. This was the era of the Great Heathen Army, the largest Viking invasion force ever assembled. And here's what your history teacher probably didn't tell you. Viking shield maidens weren't mythology, they were real. Archaeological excavations in 2017 at Birka in Sweden proved that high-status Viking women were buried with full military honors, surrounded by swords, axes, and battle equipment. DNA analysis confirmed these weren't just symbolic burials, these were actual female warriors. Norse royal women didn't sit quietly in longhouses. They led raids, they commanded fleets, they ruled kingdoms when their husbands died. Women like Lagatha, whose military campaigns were documented by the historian Saxo Grammaticus, or Fredi Stodier, who personally killed 5 women with an axe during the Vinland expeditions. When the Great Heathen Army invaded England, it wasn't just men stepping off those longships. Royal women came as leaders, advisors, and warriors. And when Anglo-Saxon forces managed to capture these women, which was rare, they faced an impossible question. What do you do with an enemy queen who has personally killed your soldiers? The answer was horrifyingly evil. Justice collided head-on with territorial war crimes, and what resulted was a cycle of brutality that would permanently reshape England. But here's what the textbooks conveniently ignore. The Saxons didn't treat these women as prisoners of war. They treated them as a new kind of weapon. And the first method they used was designed to destroy something more valuable than life itself: honor. What I'm about to describe isn't speculation. It's documented in multiple sources, including the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, though the monks who wrote it used deliberately vague language. But recent archaeological discoveries have filled in the horrifying details they tried to hide. Imagine you're a Viking noblewoman. In your culture, your hair is sacred. You've been growing it since childhood, braiding it with silver rings that display your family's wealth and status. Your clothing is woven with expensive dyes, deep reds and rich blues that announce your rank to everyone who sees you. Your appearance isn't vanity, it's your identity. Now imagine Saxon soldiers holding you down while they shave your head with a dull blade. This was the first stage of what I call the humiliation protocol. When Anglo-Saxon forces captured high-ranking Viking women, they began with the public stripping ritual. Not private, not quick, public, in the center of town, in front of crowds that had lost family members to Viking raids. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle mentions these events in frustratingly vague terms. The heathen women were brought forth and made to face Christian justice. But here's what that actually meant. First, they stripped the women completely naked. In Norse culture, where modesty was tied directly to honor, this alone was devastating. But the Saxons didn't stop there. They shaved the women's heads completely bald. They removed every piece of jewelry, melted it down, and gave the metal to the church. But here's what nobody tells you. This wasn't just humiliation. This was spiritual warfare. Vikings believed that a person's luck, their hamingja, could be physically broken by destroying the visible symbols of status.
The Saxons believed they were destroying the woman's power to curse them or bring misfortune. A recent excavation at Repton, one of the great heathen army's main winter camps, revealed something shocking. Archaeologists found a mass grave containing 264 bodies, including at least 20 women. Several of these women showed signs of perimortem trauma to the skull, injuries that happened right around the time of death. But what caught researchers' attention was the positioning. These women were buried face down. In Norse culture, that's not just disrespectful, it's a curse. It means the person's spirit can never find its way to the afterlife. The Vikings weren't just killing these women, they were trying to destroy their souls. One name keeps appearing in 4 different Saxon chronicles from this period, a woman they only called the Heathen Queen. Every single time her name is mentioned, it's been physically scratched out of the manuscript. Someone, centuries ago, decided her actual identity was too dangerous to record. But this was just the beginning. What the Saxons did next violated every medieval code of warfare, every Christian principle of mercy, and every human standard of decency. And it gets so much worse. You might be thinking, surely they eventually released these women, right? Prisoner exchanges were common in medieval warfare, but that's not what happened.
Instead, the Saxons created something far more calculated, far more cruel. They turned royal women into commodities. In 871 AD, a Viking queen named Sigrid was captured during the Battle of Wilton. She was the widow of a Norse jarl and the mother of 3 sons who were still fighting with the great heathen army. The Saxons had a valuable hostage. By the rules of medieval warfare, they should have negotiated a ransom. Instead, they sold her. Not openly, of course. The Anglo-Saxon chronicle calls it a Christian marriage, arranged by King Alfred himself. But Asser's life of King Alfred, written by a monk who actually knew the king, tells a different story. Sigrid was forced to marry a Saxon nobleman named Ealdorman Ethelwulf. She was baptized against her will, given a Christian name, and locked in an estate in Wessex, her children taken as insurance. Her youngest son, barely 8 years old, was placed in a monastery where he would be raised, Christian, and taught to hate his own heritage. This wasn't one isolated incident, this was policy. DNA analysis of burial sites in Oxford has revealed something extraordinary. Multiple graves from the late 800s contain women with Scandinavian genetic markers, but buried in Christian graves with Saxon jewelry next to Saxon noblemen. These weren't Viking raiders, these were prisoners, hostages, forced brides. The Anglo-Saxons had created what I call the hostage economy. Viking queens and noble women became bargaining chips. A Saxon lord who wanted to expand his territory could marry a captured Norse woman, absorb her family's wealth, and use her children as leverage against Viking forces who might still be fighting. But here's where it gets even darker. These women weren't just prisoners, they were breeding programs. The Saxons believed that by forcing these women to bear Christian children, they could dilute Viking bloodlines and eventually absorb Norse culture entirely. One account from the monastery at Linsfond describes a Viking woman who refused to eat for 11 days after her forced marriage. The monks recorded that she was force-fed until she became pregnant because, and this is a direct quote, "A heathen womb that bears a Christian child is sanctified by suffering." Let that sink in. They literally believed that forced pregnancy was a form of salvation. Most of these women never saw their homelands again. They died in foreign estates, surrounded by people who hated them, raising children who were taught to be ashamed of their mother's blood. But one woman refused to break. Her name was Ingrid Ragnarosea. She was a queen, a warrior, and the mother of a son who would become one of the most feared Viking leaders in history. When the Saxons captured her in 869 AD, they made the same mistake they'd made with dozens of women before her. They assumed she would eventually give up. She didn't, and her response would drench England in blood for the next 50 years. Don't click away yet, because what happened to Queen Ingrid is the most disturbing part. This entire story, and the archaeological evidence that proves it, was only discovered in 2019. Queen Ingrid was held in Nottingham for 2 years.
During that time, according to fragmentary annals from multiple sources, she refused to convert to Christianity. She refused to reveal information about Viking battle plans. She refused to eat food prepared by Saxon hands. And most importantly, she refused to marry. The Saxons tried everything: music, starvation, isolation, public beatings. Nothing worked. So they moved to permanent solutions. In medieval warfare, there was a practice called hobbling. It's exactly what it sounds like. You sever the tendons behind a person's ankles so they can never walk properly again. They're permanently crippled. They can't run, they can't fight, they can't escape. The Saxons did this to Queen Ingrid. But that wasn't all. According to Norse sagas recorded in Iceland, which historians dismissed as exaggeration until recently, they also blinded her in one eye. This wasn't random cruelty. This was symbolic. In Norse culture, Odin sacrificed one eye for wisdom. By blinding a queen, the Saxons were mocking her gods. For years, historians treated these saga accounts as propaganda, Viking descendants exaggerating Saxon brutality to justify their own violence. But in 2019, forensic archaeologists examining remains from a churchyard in Nottingham made a shocking discovery. They found a female skeleton carbon-dated to between 865 and 875, and with Scandinavian genetic markers. The woman was between 35 and 40 years old when she died, and her bones told a horrifying story. Both Achilles tendons showed evidence of deliberate severing. The healing patterns indicated she survived this injury by at least 18 months. Her left eye socket showed trauma consistent with deliberate blinding, and her right forearm had been broken and healed incorrectly, likely from defensive wounds that were never properly treated. This wasn't battlefield trauma. This was torture, deliberate, systematic, prolonged torture. But here's the detail that made international headlines: her teeth. Dental analysis revealed something extraordinary. This woman had gold wire threaded through her teeth, a practice only done for Norse royalty. The gold had been crudely torn out, leaving damage to the enamel and jawbone. The Saxons had literally tried to erase her identity by ripping the symbols of royalty from her mouth. The lead archaeologist on the project, Dr. Helena Morrison, wrote in her published paper, "The pattern of injury suggests this individual was systematically mutilated over an extended period. The intent was not execution, but permanent disfigurement, music, and prolonged suffering." Queen Ingrid died in 871 AD, still imprisoned, still unbroken. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records her death in one dismissive line: "The heathen woman perished in the winter." But the Saxons made one fatal mistake. Her son survived, and he remembered everything. I know this is getting dark, but if you're still watching, you're clearly as fascinated by history's brutal truths as
I am. Make sure you're subscribed, because next week I'm revealing what really happened during the Viking blood eagle ritual and the archaeological evidence that proves he was even worse than the legends claim. Now let me tell you about the revenge that changed England forever. Queen Ingrid's son was Ivar Ragnar, known to history as Ivar the Boneless. And when news of his mother's death reached him in 871 AD, he made a promise that was recorded in multiple Norse sagas. Every Saxon nobleman who participated in his mother's torture would be found and would suffer identical fates. He kept that promise. Between 871 and 878 AD, Ivar launched what historians call the Great Retribution, but that's a sanitized academic term. What actually happened was systematic, methodical revenge. The Norse sagas, particularly the Ragnar saga, described Ivar keeping detailed lists, names, locations, crimes. He didn't attack randomly. He targeted specific estates, specific families, specific women, and the punishments matched the crimes exactly. The wife of Elderman Ethelwulf, the man who had married the captive Viking queen Sigrid, she was found in 873 AD with her head shaved and her body displayed in the center of her husband's burning estate.
the abbess of a monastery in Mercia who had overseen the force feeding of pregnant Viking captives. The saga records that she was made to understand the suffering she had caused, a phrase that implies force feeding until death. But here's what's remarkable. We have archaeological evidence that corroborates these saga accounts. Multiple Saxon mass graves from the 870s show patterns of violence that specifically targeted women of high status. Graves in Mercia, Northumbria, and East Anglia all tell the same story. Noble women buried hastily, often in groups, with signs of violent death. One grave in particular, excavated near Repton in 2003, contained the remains of 14 Saxon women, all buried together. Forensic analysis revealed that at least 8 of them showed signs of mutilation that matched the punishments described in Norse sagas. The archaeologists originally called it a tragic civilian massacre, but when compared with saga accounts and cross-referenced with Saxon chronicles, a different picture emerged. These weren't random civilian casualties, these were targeted revenge killings. And it worked. By 878 AD, the Saxons were desperate. The great heathen army had conquered most of northern England. King Alfred, who had previously overseen the hostage economy, suddenly pivoted to a new strategy: mercy. The Treaty of Wedmore in 878 didn't just divide England between Saxon and Viking territory, it included specific provisions about the treatment of prisoners. For the first time in medieval English history, a treaty explicitly stated that women captives must be treated according to their rank, must be allowed to keep their religious practices, and must be offered ransom rather than forced conversion. This wasn't Christian charity, this was pragmatic terror. Alfred had seen what happened when you brutalized Viking queens. He'd seen the revenge campaigns. He'd seen entire Saxon noble families wiped out. The establishment of the Danelaw, the region where Viking law governed, was directly influenced by the cycle of brutality and revenge. Vikings didn't just conquer territory, they permanently settled it, because going home meant leaving their women vulnerable to capture and torture. Genetic studies of modern English populations confirm this. Across northern and eastern England, Scandinavian DNA markers are far more prevalent than previously thought. These aren't just descendants of Viking raiders, they're descendants of Viking families who chose permanent settlement over the risk of losing their women to Saxon captivity. One historian, Dr. James Crawford of Cambridge, wrote, "The brutalization of captured Viking noble women in the 860s and 870s directly led to permanent Scandinavian settlement in England. Fear of repeated torture campaigns made retreat impossible. The Anglo-Saxons didn't just lose territory, they permanently altered England's genetic and cultural makeup through their own cruelty." And here's the final twist. Remember that DNA analysis of Saxon noble graph containing Scandinavian women? After 878 AD, that pattern stops completely. No more forced marriages, no more hostage programs, no more breeding campaigns. Why? Because Alfred knew exactly what would happen if it continued. The revenge that Queen Ingrid's son unleashed didn't just change England's borders, it changed England's soul. So, let's be clear about what really happened in medieval England. The brutalization of captured Viking noble women wasn't a few isolated incidents, it was systematic policy. It was calculated dehumanization designed to break an enemy's will. It absorbed their culture, and it backfired catastrophically. The cycle of torture and revenge between 865 and 878 AD killed thousands, reshaped England's political landscape, and created permanent cultural divisions that lasted for centuries. The Danelaw wasn't just conquered territory, it was a living reminder that mutual brutality breeds brutality. And here's why this matters today. We're watching the exact same pattern repeat across the world. When captured leaders are brutalized, when prisoners are tortured, when women are systematically abused as weapons of war, it doesn't end conflicts, it guarantees that those conflicts will span generations. The Middle East, Eastern Europe, Central Africa, everywhere we see cycles of violence, we see the same pattern.
Humiliation breeds revenge, revenge breeds retaliation, and retaliation breeds permanent hatred. The Anglo-Saxons thought they were being strategic. They thought breaking Viking queens would break Viking resistance. Instead, they created an enemy that would never forgive, never forget, and never stop until justice, however brutal, was served. So, here's my question for you. If you were Queen Ingrid's son, if you had watched your mother tortured for years while imprisoned in a foreign land, what would you have chosen? Mercy or revenge? Would you have broken the cycle, or would you have become part of it? Drop your answer in the comments because I want to know where you stand. And if you want to see more hidden history that textbooks deliberately ignore, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Next week, I'm revealing the truth about the Viking blood eagle, and trust me, the archaeological